Big breaking news to bring you on the Football Terrace today. We'll be hearing via an exclusive interview with The Athletic how Chelsea Football Club were able to take Mudryk away from Arsenal. The Shakhtar CEO speaks. We're also taking a look at big breaking news today that Antonio Conte could be on his way out of Tottenham, with Thomas Tuchel potentially being lined up as a replacement. Marcus Rashford's new £300,000 a week deal is in negotiations, and Arsenal looking at a potential deal. Keep an eye on Trossard, according to Fabrizio Romano, and much, much more. Make sure like buttons are being smashed. Make sure you are subscribing to the Football Terrace. Let's go.
Figure of 100 million euros was basically the same, but the difference is the speed of payment. Is that correct?
Offer was the same. Not approximately the same. It was the same figure, fixed part, variable part, both bonuses, it was the same. But if we look inside of fixed part and bonuses, it was completely different.
So interesting information there that both clubs offered the exact same amount of money. So Chelsea didn't outbid Arsenal. It is purely the payment structure and speed of payments that was the fundamental difference. Now, regulars on the Football Terrace, people that have been here for years, have heard me talk about this. The structure of payments is every bit as important as the total fee. How quickly will a team get their money? How quickly will Shakhtar get their 100 million plus euros? The fact that Shakhtar are giving 25% of this away to help support victims of the war currently going on in their country between them and Russia was also a big motivating factor for them. And according here to the CEO of Shakhtar, Sergei Palkin, Chelsea offered much better terms to them within the fee than Arsenal did.
In what way?
Different time of payment, different kind of bonuses, because yes, we can talk about bonus, but this bonus should be somehow achievable, realistic, let's say,
Well, this reminds me very much of when Liverpool and Barcelona did their deal for Philippe Coutinho. One of the first offers that Barcelona put in, they wanted to pay big bonuses towards 150 million, but the bonuses included clauses like winning the Ballon d'Or in the same year as winning the Champions League. And when you multi-layer your bonuses in that way, they could become almost impossible to achieve. And it appears that's what Arsenal have done here. It appears that's what Arsenal have done. They've offered the same as Chelsea, but made it harder for Shakhtar to ascertain. Therefore, Shakhtar have accepted Chelsea's bid before that of Arsenal's. Now, what can't go unmentioned and isn't mentioned in this exclusive interview with The Athletic is the fact that Arsenal also only offered around £50,000 a week to Mudryk, where Chelsea have offered £100,000 to £120,000 a week to the young man. And of course, that being the deciding factor in the player saying, okay, well, I'll give Chelsea a chance. I think Chelsea have had to overpay, as in overpay what Arsenal are willing to give, because they're not in Arsenal's position right now. They're sitting 10th in the league. They're very unlikely to be in the Champions League next year unless they win it. And they're at the beginning of a big rebuild. So there is an element of compensation that is going to be needed here and has been delivered. From an Arsenal fan point of view, Igal said it on the Top 6 show last night. And I get the logic. We won't get into a bidding war. We won't overpay. Well, you did get into a bidding war because of Chelsea. You put 3 bids in and you matched Chelsea's bid. So that PR nonsense for me has to go. What Arsenal have done that I do think is right, though, is they're not willing to break internal wage structures for an incoming player who is yet to achieve. If Mudryk was 24 and was the Champions League winner and was already considered one of the best wingers in the world, then you can justify bringing him in on large amounts of money compared to some of his teammates, especially when Saka and Martinelli and Saliba are going through new contract negotiations. But Arsenal have stood firm and said we're not going to spend it. The only way this goes wrong for Arsenal is if they don't spend the money elsewhere, especially in this January. It's a nonsense that nobody's available because everybody's for sale at the right price. They need to go and bring somebody in to strengthen up their rosters. Now, what's interesting is that Fabrizio Romano this morning has said they keep an eye on Trossard of Brighton because he's one of the players Arsenal have been offered as a possibility. At the moment, it's on Arsenal, so they have to decide what they want to do. And I think someone like Trossard, from an attacking point of view, could be very good for Arsenal in the short term. The problem you have is that do they see Trossard as a long-term solution? And I kind of look at it from I still think Arsenal have got to look to top-down players. So bring someone in that can be a first teamer to push the players that are currently in the first team to get better. I don't think they're at the stage yet, squad-wise, where they can be looking to backfill. But sometimes you've got to deviate slightly from the plan. And someone like Trossard, I don't think he is as good as Martinelli or Saka. I don't think he is as good as an attacking player as an Odegaard. But what a great option Premier League proven to have on the bench, not just this season, but moving forward. There's also talk of Rafinha coming in at Arsenal as well. I'm very intrigued to see how that one pans out. The player spoke about how he wants to stay at Barcelona, but they've got to raise a lot of money. They've got to raise about £200 million, and they're not allowed to sell any more assets. But that's direct from the Shakhtar CEO as to why Chelsea got the player over Arsenal. I want your views and opinions as to whether or not you think that is a right thing to do. Now, this was an interesting story from Sammy McBell in the Daily Mail. He said there is an understanding from all parties between Antonio Conte and Spurs that it would be self-defeating to activate the extension if their visions are not aligned. Now, I've been thinking this for a while, and maybe they'll sort themselves out, maybe they'll fix themselves. But in my opinion, Antonio Conte, as it stands, is not going to stay at Tottenham. I don't see how, as things stand, Antonio Conte can remain at Tottenham. Tottenham are not buying him an abundance of players that fit his ideology, philosophy, age profile. There is clearly a disconnect. There is clearly a frustration. There is clearly a problem. There is clearly issues ongoing between him and the board. Tottenham are playing terribly. Terribly. They can't stop conceding goals, which is unrecognizable to a well-performing Antonio Conte team. His teams are built upon being solid at the back, resolute, hard to break down, which was one of the reasons they made the top four after his arrival last year. Of course, it would be self-defeating to activate that extension clause for everybody involved, because all you're going to end up doing is sacking him and paying him out compensation. Antonio Conte is on the, in my opinion, home straight. He's on the home straight, and he's close to ending his relationship. Whether you want to call it him being sacked or whether you want to call it him leaving, that's down to your own interpretation. But for me, the fact that Tottenham are buying players, the fact they've spent £172 million on him, but 50% of that hasn't been spent on players that he wants, this is death by 1,000 cuts, but it's still a sacking. Very much reminds me, not the inner goings on, but when Poch was sacked in February 2020, and nobody wanted to believe it because he wasn't actually sacked. Pretty much season ends and boom, he's gone out the door. You think that decision was just made in a couple of days? No, it was in the February. In fact, it was February, the early part of February. And the reason I know is I was on my way to get my hair transplant the day that Le Parisien announced the news. And I think the same thing is happening here with Antonio Conte. I think the board have already said we don't want him anymore. Let's not buy him. Anything else that's too expensive that we can't either sell on or a new manager would like. If he doesn't fit our long-term philosophy, we're going to move him on. And I think the Spurs, whether they get a new investment, new owner or not, they've got to move away from the Jose, Nuno, Conte-style managers, these pragmatists, these dinosaurs, in terms of their ideology. They've got to go and get Poch-esque football back. They've got to go and get somebody that's going to play expansive, attractive football, like a Ten Hag, like a Mikel Arteta, someone that's going to get the juices flowing of the fans. That is what's needed. So look, I believe he's going to be on his way out the door, but I want to get your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments section now, people. And another exit that's a real interesting one from Man United that I want to speak about, and we'll get onto Rashford in a minute. This is a really interesting one that Newcastle have expressed an interest in Scott McTominay. Scott would be open to moving to St James's Park. And of course, he's open to it because they want him as a first team player. And Scotty Mac isn't a first team player at Man United anymore. I personally would like to see him stay on as a fringe player. But that depends on who else we can buy. But I think Fred stepped up to the plate a lot recently. And I think Fred is now favoured over Scott McTominay. But the size, the height, and the physicality of Scott is something Ten Hag wants in his squad. I believe Newcastle could sign him, but it means Man United have got to bring a replacement in. So if, for instance, today Man United could get a deal done for Ruben Neves, I'm just throwing that name out there because that's a preference for me. I think they let Scott McTominay go. If United can't bring in another body, I can't imagine there being a cat's chance in hell of McTominay being allowed to leave in this window. But with the improvement of Man United, and this is where I know I don't use net spend, but for anyone who still believes it's true, this is where our net spend will improve. As the team gets better, moves up the league and performs, even your fringe players become more valuable because the club can say they're integral to our improvement and are needed by the manager. Suddenly, you're looking at players like Scott McTominay fetching in fees of 25 to 30 million pounds. AWB may go in the summer. Right now, he's playing well again. You're not going to get your 50 million back, but you're easily getting 25, 30 million pounds. Suddenly, you'll be able to raise money. And that's something Man United haven't been able to do for a decade very often because we've been so poor. So there is a silver lining to this news. Improve the squad, more money coming in, and Scott McTominay going on and being happy. However, there is something to be said about academy players being part of your fringe setup, generally speaking, not becoming as disgruntled as players that you purchase for big money. So let's see how this one plays out. In other Man United news, Marcus Rashford is in negotiations as it stands for a new deal. Man United are reluctant to break the 300 grand a week barrier. He's currently on £200,000 per week, not the 250 that's often reported. This is going to be really interesting to see what United do because contract talks did start very briefly in the summer. Ten Hag made it very, very clear to the board that he didn't want Rashford getting a new deal, didn't want the club being committed to 300 grand a week unless Rashford can get himself back to his very best. And Rashford's not only back at his best, he is growing and developing and move beyond it. His form right now makes him the best attacking player in the world. He's had a very good season overall. His form now is at best levels in the world. It will peter off. He's not going to keep scoring in every single game. No player in the history of football ever has. But I think that Rashford now is looking like a 250, 300 grand a week player. What I hope Man United do in this circumstance is increase his base to 240, 250, 260, and then add an incentive for goals and wins, maybe collaborating them together for him to go to that 300,000 plus mark. That for me is sensible, or maybe even more important than goals and wins, trophies being won. This is very much Liverpool's model. They have huge bonuses that are paid out when they win major trophies. Maybe that's one of the reasons why FSG don't invest in more players, because they keep winning more trophies. Those bonuses get higher. It becomes even more expensive. But Man United have got to look at these options because we don't want to keep overpaying at base level because that makes it harder to move players on if they fail. Not that I think Rashford's going to be moved on, but you set precedents whenever you increase salary. But Rashford is one of the best wide football players in the world. Man United are one of the richest clubs in the world. He's in great form. He has to be rewarded. He's already on 200 grand a week. He's not going to take a pay cut. He's going to want to be paid the going rate. And I think 250,000, 260,000 as a base rate at Man United for Rashford is worth it. But I want your thoughts and I want your feelings below. We're back later today with more content. Me and Lee up at 3:30 plus match reactions to the FA Cup games later today. Do me a favor before you leave and smash the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the Football Terrace. Until next time, take care. Goodbye. God bless. And we'll see you soon.